The Audi A5. It's a bit of a looker, isn't it? It's been around for just over 15 years, and every iteration seems to get even sharper lines and even more tech. That's great, but with coupe looks, should at least bring some kind of coupe handling. Heck, Audi even said, and I quote, "The suspension harmonises perfectly with the cultivated sportiness that all Audi A5 models convey." The problem is, they say this every time about even models like this 40 TDI, and the car always seems to fall a bit short of being fun. Let's see if they've sharpened up more than just the lines this time. My name's Tom, and you're watching Paragon Cars. Let's go. Now, spec-wise, this is probably what you're going to want to go for. This is the 40 TDI, which means it's a 2-litre diesel with 190 horsepower and 400 Nm of torque. A great engine, but it's made even better by the QUATTRO system fitted to this particular car. Being an Audi A5, it means this is the proper Torsen QUATTRO system as well, meaning you get a permanent 60-40 split between the front and the rear wheels. Let's see it in action on the 30 to 70 sprint. Of course, it's no rocket ship, but 6.62 seconds is certainly not slow. That's quicker than a 306 horsepower Range Rover, and not far off some smaller hot hatches. For every day, it's plenty quick enough. Now, I've said this numerous times, but the interior of this A5 for me is just perfect. Everything has its place, yet the design isn't boring either. Physical controls for the climate, highly adjustable seats, and a very well designed virtual cockpit. Latter Audis have definitely gone too far with their design and technology. Hashtag bring back the scroll wheel. Moving to the rear, you'd expect to find a little more room than an Audi A3, but unfortunately there's the exact same 35.1 inches of legroom. With its coupe lines, the headroom also gets eaten into, which makes the rear of this Audi A5 pretty tight for anyone above 5'11". Thankfully, you get an armrest and your own climate though, so not the end of the world. One thing I do find hilariously abysmal though, is just how far the rear windows go down. I mean, just look at this. It almost looks broken. Moving further back, we get to the boot, and thankfully there's no complaints here. It's a big, wide, electrically operated opening with plenty of space for long and even taller items. If need be, you can fold the seats down to create a large flat load floor. Okay, let's get behind the wheel and see if I can feel any of that cultivated sportiness. Right then, Audi A5. We've done quite a few of these before, like RS5s and the 252 horsepower version of this. But this 40 TDI is the car most people end up with. You know, how many RS5s do you see on the road? So I thought we'd give a crack at reviewing this and see what it's like, really. See how different it is, if there's any difference in terms of comfort. I know there's obviously going to be a difference in terms of economy. This being a 2-litre diesel is supposed to get 57 miles per gallon on the combined cycle. Audi claim you'll get 64 out of this on the motorway, which seems like quite a lot even for a 2-litre diesel like this, because it is a pretty heavy car. But driving around town, it's typical Audi. We are riding on the S-Line suspension because this is a Black Edition car. Black Edition basically means S-Line with black bits on it and usually bigger wheels. So you've got 20-inch wheels, fairly firm suspension, but it's not so firm that it's uncomfortable. It just makes you feel like you're in control of the car. And in terms of parking, I mean, this is basically the same size as an Audi A4, same chassis and everything. And visibility really isn't that bad, actually. You've got nice big wing mirrors, you've got good visibility out the back, especially for a coupe styled car. You've got loads of steering angle. and you got parking sensors as standard on the Black Edition cars. No reverse camera, which would be nice, but the parking sensors just about do the job. I'd say for driving around a city, this is pretty much the perfect size of car, because even in tighter spaces it's still easy to park and you can still get out of the car after you've parked, more importantly. Right, so this is where diesels can either be pretty awful or pretty good. So you've got start stop on, just in comfort mode, and we're just going to give it 50% throttle. Hopefully, yeah, see, not the fastest response in the world, but once it's moving, that 400 Newton meters of torque throws you down the road at a pretty neat pace, especially with this Quattro all-wheel drive. This is proper Torsen Quattro all-wheel drive as well, so 60-40 split. But you saw there, it took a while to start the engine. I find start-stop in diesels to be pretty slow, actually. You know, it takes over a second, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're driving and you see a gap, especially in a busy town like London, it's kind of annoying having to wait. So most of the time I would just have that system off, because it just gets in the way more than actually helping you save any fuel. In terms of saving fuel, let's reset our trip computer and see if we can get above 60 miles per gallon on the motorway. I think, using my car wisdom, we'll probably do like 51. It just depends how busy the M25 is today. Hopefully we can get above 60 though, if it's a clear run. Before we do that, let's have a quick taste of the handling to see if it's any different from its petrol counterparts. Right, let's get into dynamic. To do that, we can use our favourites button on the steering wheel, which for some reason they got rid of in latter Audis. You'll know if you watched the Audi A6 review I released a couple of weeks ago that you couldn't change your driving mode with the favourites button anymore. Bit of an annoying one, that. Thankfully in this A5 you can. What does dynamic mode do though? Well, it sharpens up the steering, throttle response and engine. So it means when you put your foot down, it just gets on with it. And this torquey diesel does a pretty good job of picking up the pace. That's 70 already. Doesn't feel like it needs to be any faster than that. One thing you do notice already though is quite a lot of understeer. Hopefully on the faster stuff I can sort of get rid of that by driving a bit better and not being so aggressive with turning. But so far it feels like a typical Audi. Anyway, let's use our favourites button again to go into efficiency and see if we can get over 60 miles per gallon out of this thing. I'm hoping we can. Right, motorway driving. This is where you're going to want to spend most of your time if you own a diesel car. So, what's the engine like? How does it respond? Well, if you give it about 30% throttle, downshifts a gear, and this is where diesels are so good because you just get instant torque and you get a lot of it. So it means you just have this effortless feeling of acceleration. And because it's like that, because it's effortless, it almost relaxes you. It's quite weird. If you've got a small engine, like a 1.5 litre that you can get in this car, it just feels like it's straining a little bit. So this is actually a much more relaxing car to drive on the motorway, purely because it's just got more torque. Then in terms of comfort, like road noise and wind noise is fantastic in pretty much every Audi in the range. The A5 in particular is really good because it actually has a really low drag coefficient with acoustic glazed glass as well. So it's almost like Audi A7, A8 levels of quiet in here. It's really impressive. The only thing I'm noticing though is that there is a little bit more road noise than I would like, and I think that is mainly due to the 20-inch wheels that we have on this car. I think if you were to get this, try and spec 19 inches max, as the 20-inch wheels don't really add anything in terms of handling and do add just a little bit too much road noise into the cabin. Then in terms of visibility, it's actually fairly good. You've got pretty skinny A-pillars, and then B-pillars are quite far back, plus you've got frameless windows, which just means there's less physical metal in the way of your vision. And then the wing mirrors are pretty good, and they're nice and wide, so you can see in your blind spot fairly easily without having to look, behind you. Then one thing the Audi A4 and A5 are actually really good at is just seating comfort. The seats in these cars, for some reason, are just unbelievably comfortable. I don't know if it's just my body shape or something, but you've got loads of leg room, which you don't get in the Audi A3. Your legs are quite squished inwards. And then you've got loads of under thigh support, you've got the extendable bit, and then you can adjust the pitch of the base loads, so you kind of feel like you're almost lying back in the chair rather than sitting on it, which I really like. And the seats get just about low enough for me. I would like them to get a little bit lower if possible, but they're going in the right direction, certainly better than the previous generation Audi A5. Plus the steering wheel comes nice and close to you as well, which means you never feel like you're reaching too far to drive the car. It's just a perfect seating position, really. Then in terms of quality, Audi are always fairly good at this kind of stuff. Sometimes you can get a bit of a lemon car that was clearly built on a Friday afternoon when everyone wanted to go home. But yeah, overall it's pretty good. You've got squidgy materials everywhere in the cabin. If it's not squidgy, it's usually Alcantara or leather. And then the plastics that are here are fairly high quality. The only bit of plastic I would try and avoid is this piano black plastic, as it does scratch really easily and it becomes a bit of an eyesore even after a couple of years. This car's only just gone over 3 years old and there's already little like swirl marks in the plastic, and the light reflects off it as well into your eyes. So if you can, just go for the brushed aluminium trim, as I think it looks nicer, and B, it's much more harder wearing. And I guess that kind of completes the wear and tear section as well. Nothing in here is really worn much apart from that plastic, to be honest. Now, in terms of spec, this is really important, because if you don't know what you're doing, you can end up spending way too much money, and a lot more money than you need to spend to get what you want out of this. Now, a lot of people will lease these cars because that is actually the cheapest way to get one new, and that's why you see a lot of black edition cars with the 40 TDI 2-litre diesel engine, purely because they're like company cars and people just do a lot of miles in them. But they end up getting either the wrong things or just too much of everything. The main things you want to get are the virtual cockpit, so the tech package is definitely something you're going to want to get because it gives you the virtual cockpit and a larger nav screen. Then the next thing you want to get is the comfort and sound package, and that is pretty much it, because that'll come with your heated seats and it'll come with the Bang & Olufsen sound system, which isn't necessarily a must, but it does sound really good actually, really worth the money. And then the last thing is just going to be the driver assistance package, and that comes with your adaptive cruise control and lane assist, and once you've lived with it, you do not want to live without it, guys. It is seriously easy to use, and it just takes all the stress out of driving. And the thing is, if you're going for the 40 TDI, you're going to be spending a lot of time on the motorway, and as soon as you turn the system on, you basically don't have to drive the car at all. Below 40 miles an hour, it'll completely drive the car itself for about 5 minutes before it tells you to put your hands on the steering wheel. Once you're going above 40, it gives you about 15 seconds where you can just take your hands completely off the wheel and it'll drive the car for you. And it works really well, come rain or shine, so definitely worth having. You don't need stuff like the heads-up display. You don't really need a reverse camera, you can get it if you want. But yeah, as long as you've got heated seats, the virtual cockpit, and the B&O stereo in the comfort and sound pack, then that's all you really need. Loads of people go way over the top and get stuff like a 360 camera, which you just don't need. It's cool, but you just don't need it. And then some people are at the other end of the spectrum. They end up getting a sport and then not getting any spec that they want. You know, you can spend £4,000 on optional extras on this and get everything you need, maximum 6. But you don't need to spend 22.5 grand, which is very much doable in this kind of car, because it's just not worth it. You're just never going to use those features. Stuff like park assist for parallel parking, you know, you use it once or twice and then you realise it doesn't really get close enough to the curb, and sometimes it won't find the parking space, so you just never end up using it. Right, that is our motorway stint over. So how did we do? Well, it's pretty close to what I predicted. We're sitting at 52.9 at the minute, and that figure's still going up. We are in a little bit of traffic, so I do think on a long run you know, max you might get is about 58 miles per gallon. And I know for a fact the petrol car will quite easily do 45 miles per gallon if you're driving it at around 60, 70 miles an hour, which is what I've been doing here. So with a bit of quick maths, you're probably going to spend around the same money as you would with a petrol car, which is kind of a shame. But the one thing you do get is really nice torque delivery. And I think if you are on the motorway a lot, the diesel is still the better option, because if you're doing loads of miles, it does work out to be very, very slightly cheaper, and it's just a bit nicer to drive as well. It doesn't feel like it's straining itself so much. But what happens when you get on a B road? Does it detract from the fun? Let's find out. Right, back into dynamic. We've got the traction as off as it'll go. I believe that actually is fully off in an Audi. Let's see what it's like. Third gear is really strong in this actually. And the thing you notice is it kind of rotates. The A5 is actually a surprisingly good handling car. It's weird, slowly it kind of understeers, but once you're above about 40 miles an hour, it just holds on forever. It doesn't ever seem to let go. It's weird. Brakes are nice and sharp. They're not massive discs, but they're just calibrated well, so there's quite a lot of feedback from them. You know if you lean into them that it's going to get the car stopped. But the steering, it just kind of feels really nice and predictable. It's like a well-judged computer game, is how I'd describe it. An acceleration for a 2-litre diesel ain't half bad, really. The gearing's really well judged in this. Third, fourth and fifth, really, really strong gears. And this dual clutch gearbox does a really good job of just, you know, managing the power. Having that proper quattro all-wheel drive really helps as well. It really does push you out of the corner a lot more than a Haldex system does. That's where the Golf R really fell short, is it doesn't really push you out of a corner. It kind of just, I don't know, it kind of just takes you around gently. Whereas this, you just plant your foot and it just gets on with the job. In the wet, you'd even get some oversteer out of this, I think. Look at that, still averaging just over 40 miles per gallon. That's not bad. You know, when I did the 252 horsepower petrol version of this car, I was really surprised at just how capable it was. And this is more of the same. The suspension seems to be really well calibrated for British roads as well. A lot of cars, especially BMWs, can be overly stiff. Or not necessarily overly stiff, they just kind of have this weird effect where they skip over the road. Whereas this Audi A5 doesn't do that. Alright, let's give it one more go. Full send. Look at that, the speed you can carry around there, and a little bit of oversteer. I mean, in the wet and the snow, you'd get power oversteer in this. And in the dry, you get lift-off oversteer. It's a really capable chassis. Surprisingly capable. You know, you can actually feel it rotate, which is not something you usually get in an Audi. Even their RS cars can sometimes be a little bit slow, especially when it comes to the corners. But to me, this handles better than an Audi S3. Feels more darty, feels like there's less weight up front, even though there technically isn't. But it just feels like the balance is nicer and the rotation is there. You can carry more speed into a corner and get your foot down earlier. It's very surprising, that. And the weird thing is, the Audi RS5 felt heavier in the corners, probably because there's just more weight on the nose, and only had more grip, really, because it was a wider stanced, more tired car. This feels more darty, if anything. Surprising. Well, this is where third and fourth gear are really good, and the size of the car is about right, actually. It doesn't feel too wide. You've still got room in your lane to move about with. And it's quick, man. Look at that. God. It just gives you so much confidence to push it. And powering out of the corners like that, you know, you'd surprise quite a few hot hatches, I think. But look at the acceleration, so like 20 miles an hour in third, foot down, and you've just got that instant torque. That's why the 30 to 70 was faster from third rather than second. And look at that, no understeer around there. It has more front end grip than you'd expect. It just sounds weird though, saying it's got more front end grip than a Golf R. But it definitely does. Maybe not the new one, but the equivalent version to this, I mean, but you can carry a fair amount more speed into a corner. Every time I drive one of these, I'm surprised at how capable it is. One more time for good measure. That's where you need the Quattro. You know, a lot of journalists say you don't need the Quattro all-wheel drive, but it does add a lot of capability, and it just makes the car feel a bit more solid as well. It's hard to describe, really. It feels more sure-footed, more tanky, and just more capable. Like if I slow right down here, go into second, then put my foot down, there's just no drama. But is it fun though? Well, it's borderline fun, you know. It's so close. If there was a bit more movement in the chassis, yeah, I mean, I would call it fun then. I mean, it's so close. You know, like BMW is probably 10 out of 10. If that was 10 out of 10 for fun, this is going to be like an 8.5. You know, it's got all the feel that you want. It's got the positive turn-in. You can feel what the chassis is doing. You get a little bit of oversteer, but you just need a little bit more. It's like with a lot of modern Audis. They are going in the right direction though, which is nice. They're not just straight line machines anymore. So yeah, I have to say it's definitely an improvement over the previous models. Is it perfect though? Nah, not quite. As a daily though, god damn, is it good. And that's the thing, you know, I can rave about how well cars handle all the time, but most of the time you're going to be sitting in traffic, sipping on a coffee and listening to your favourite radio station. And for that, the Audi is just about perfect. Let's try and get the whole package though, shall we? As always, I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, give it a like and why not subscribe? Because not only can you see more cars like this, you can see everything we have for sale, which as usual includes the car in this video. My name's Tom, and you've been watching Paragon Cars. I will see you on the next one. Goodbye.